comrades and friends. Welcome to the program Global Weekly News, serial number 177. First item, elections in Tanzania, government repression. On October 29, 2025, presidential elections took place in Tanzania of Africa. This has put the country into its deepest political crisis in decades. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner with an overwhelming 97.66% of the vote. The results widely denounced as fraudulent and surrounded by an atmosphere of repression, violence and systematic silencing of disaster. In the months leading up to the polls, opposition parties were systematically harassed, rallies were disrupted, candidates were denied registration, and media outlets critical of the government faced suspension. The banning of opposition leader Tundu Lissu from contesting and the arrest of dozens of party members preceded before the electoral process. What followed the disputed poll was a wave of protests in Tanzania's recent history. Demonstrations erupted across major cities as citizens rejected the result. The government's response was brutal. Under a nationwide curfew and a total internet shutdown, security forces unleashed a wave of violence against the protesters. The opposition claimed that thousands were killed or have disappeared. The ruling party relied on the myth of Tanzania being an island of peace to suppress dissent. Religious leaders were co-opted into spreading this peace gospel. The African Union was quick to congratulate President Suluhu on her victory, a move that provoked widespread condemnation across the continent of Africa. In a reversal, the African Union leader acknowledged that the elections had not met the threshold of free and fair democratic values. In a statement, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights expressed deep concern over the situation, citing grave violations of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which Tanzania ratified in 1884. Israel attacks Lebanon. Comrades, second item, Israel attacks Lebanon. Almost 1 year after the ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel took effect, the Israeli occupation forces has continued to launch deadly airstrikes across Lebanon with a considerable escalation of attacks on 10th November. Israel has reportedly violated the ceasefire deal 5,163 times, killing at least 309 people in Lebanon since November 27, when the truce came into force, 24. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun asserted that being engaged in negotiations with Israel is the only way to achieve his country's national goals. Third item, comrades, constitutional amendment in Pakistan, protests. New constitutional amendments may fundamentally change the judicial structure of the country, along with establishing the supremacy of the country's armed forces in the political system. The draft of the 27th Constitutional Amendment Bill was finalized on 10th November, days after it was presented by the government headed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on 8th November to the Senate. The drafting process did not involve any major opposition parties or any other significant stakeholders. Key amendments will be made to Articles 200, 243 and 248 of the Constitution. It will also add a new chapter to the Constitution related to the establishment of a Federal Constitutional Court, FCC, Federal Constitutional Court. The proposed FCC will have jurisdiction on issues related to Constitution. The 27th Amendment also gives the President more powers to transfer High Court judges. As per the amendment, a new post called the Chief of Defence Forces is created. The officers of the armed forces who would be promoted to 5-star ranks will be able to retain their ranks and privileges for life and will have similar insecurities enjoyed by the President. Similar immunities enjoyed by the President. Pakistan has a long history of military coup against the civilian governments. For a large part of its over 7 decades history, the army has directly ruled the country. Last year's elections were manipulated to ensure the armed forces indirect control over the civilian administration. The opposition has claimed that the amendment will further tilt the balance of power in favor of the country's armed forces, legalizing it and further weakening civilian control. A coalition led by the main opposition, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, PTI, had called for the nationwide demonstration against the 27th Amendment on 9th November, calling it an assault on democracy. The leader of the left-wing Haquq-e-Khalq party, in a post on X media, has said that we are witnessing attempts to impose a colonial style of governance in Pakistan. The 27th Amendment is an acceleration of this process. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan questioned the intention of the government in advancing amendments in such a haste and hurried manner without proper consultation with the stakeholders. Secretary General of the Awami Workers Party claimed that the proposed amendment aims to create more centralization and authoritarianism and called for a united and organized movement of the working classes against such moves. A petition was also filed in Supreme Court challenging the proposed amendments. Despite strong opposition, last year the Sharif government rushed the 26th Amendment Act in a similar manner, which had increased the control of the presidency over the country's judiciary. Fourth item, comrades, United Nations 30th Climate Conference at Brussels. The president of the New Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, and the former president of Brazil said on 6th November that the institution she leads is ready to finance projects promoting a just transition focused on innovation, environmental protection, and social development. As the final speaker of the inaugural plenary, Dilma reminded attendees that the Amazonian city hosting the conference reminds us forcefully that protecting nature and promoting human well-being are inseparable tasks. Pointing to the impacts already caused by the climate crisis, such as floods, agricultural losses, and food insecurity, Dilma Rousseff stressed that the developing countries are the most affected. The poorest suffer the most, she said. The emphasis on using national currencies instead of the American dollar has been a recurring theme in Dilma's speeches. Dilma affirmed that the New Development Bank is ready to act as a multilateral partner, expanding climate financing, promoting the spread of green technologies, offering solutions in local currencies. She defended the Paris Agreement as a civilizational pact. She warned that the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade is under threat. The powerful nations show disrespect towards the sovereignty of developing countries and reminded that climate efforts must recognize different national contexts. Some still seem to believe that the law of the strongest should prevail. Climate change waits for no one and respects to borders. Dilma Rousseff declared, stressing that cooperation is the only viable path towards effective collective action. Created in 2024, the new development bank of the BRICS has sought to consolidate itself as an alternative to IMF World Bank. Under Dilma's leadership, since 2023, the bank has strengthened its international presence. The bank has 11 member countries and has financed more than 120 projects totaling around $4,000 crore around the globe. Brazil alone accounts for 29 of these projects, with disbursements reaching 400 crore American dollars. Comrades and friends, fifth item, COP30 in Brazil to prevent climate collapse. COP means Conference of the Parties. 30th Conference of the Parties began in Brazil on 6th November. A UN meeting attended by nearly 50 world leaders to address the most pressing issues of climate change. This meeting is being held in Belém, a city located in the Amazon, one of the regions most affected and threatened by climate change. Brazil's President Lula da Silva is hosting a conference that aims to promote an agenda already agreed upon in the Paris Agreement, which has not yet been fulfilled by the nearly 195 signatory countries. The meeting of world leaders will consist of 3 working groups: climate and nature, energy transition, and review of the Paris Agreement, in addition to a plenary session. Lula said that accelerating the energy transition and protecting nature are the 2 most effective ways to combat global warming. In addition, Lula called for the elimination of fossil fuel subsidies, increased climate financing, and a just energy transition before temperatures rise by 2.5 degrees centigrade by 2026. More than 2.5 lakh people could die each year from causes related to climate change. Lula has made significant efforts to halt the brutal deforestation of the Brazilian Amazon. The presidents of China and the United States, the 2 most important economic powers in the world and the most polluting, is striking. Regarding Donald Trump's absence, Colombian President Gustavo Petro said it represents a denial of science, leading his society into abyss, and which is the rest of humanity. Abyss means is a hell. He is putting the society to hell, and rest of humanity also to hell. Petro, not heaven, hell. Petro also criticized Europe's enormous spending on weapons. Russia is not the enemy. The climate crisis is the enemy. Petro also pointed out that climate collapse is the general death of life on the planet. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, maintained the same tone of severity and alarm in his speech. Pope sent a statement to Conference of the Parties 30, calling for greater investment in nature conservation. 6th item, comrades. CELAC European Union Summit urges peace. We go from unilateralism to multilateralism, you see. What is CELAC? Latin American Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. That is CELAC. I think it has a membership of 33 members or so. And European Union has a membership of 27 countries. So Latin American and European nations issued a call for peace and dialogue following a high-level summit between the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, and the European Union. The joint communique noted, "We reiterate our opposition to the threat or use of force and to any action that is not in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations." Since early September, US forces have struck a reported 20 vessels and killed 76 civilians. Trump administration threatens land strikes inside Venezuela as part of its purported fight against drug trafficking. Washington is aiming for even regime change. Colombian President Gustavo Petro said, Colombian President, and he is the summit host, Gustavo Petro called the event a great success, denouncing US pressure on some countries to boycott it. He urged the CELAC and the European Union to constitute a unified beacon to address any kind of barbarism. The CELAC European Union Summit was preceded by a two-day gathering of Latin American and Caribbean social movements, also in Santa Marta, that brought together hundreds of activists. The Social Movement Summit, held at Santa Marta, a city, produced a joint statement expressing solidarity with Palestine, denouncing the military threats against Venezuela, and pledging to fight for social justice, migrant rights, and against gender discrimination. Comrade seventh item, Norman Bethune. Norman Bethune was born on 4th March 1890 and died on 12th November 1939. On 12th November, on his death anniversary, we remember Norman Bethune is committed communist and internationalist doctor who not only believed that health should always be a right for all, but fought for a society that would make this a reality. In his home in Canada, Bethune provided free health care for the poor people during the onset of the Great Depression, 29 to 33, learning from the example of Soviet Union. After joining the Communist Party of Canada, he volunteered to join the fight against fascism in the Spanish Civil War. Shortly thereafter, he joined a medical brigade to support the Chinese people's struggles against the fascism and imperialism in the Second Sino-Japanese War, supporting the Communist Party of China. Let us see a quote from Norman Bethune. "Medicine, as we are practicing, is a luxury trade. We are selling breads at the price of jewels. Let us take the profits, the private economic profits, out of medicine and purify our profession of rapacious individualism. Let us say to the people, not how much have you got, but how best can we serve you." Very good quotation. Lastly, comrades, from Palestine to Venezuela, always the US is behind the door. Palestinian journalist Asil Saleh reflects on US attempts to destabilize nations to achieve its interests. From Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945, to the war against Vietnam between 1955 and 1975, the war in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2021, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and countless more in between, the US war machine has claimed the lives of millions of people around the globe using false pretexts every time. The US continued its lethal operations, fueling and igniting proxy wars in West Asia during the Arab revolts, primarily in Syria and Yemen. US provided Israel with unwavering military support since the Zionist state was established in 1848. The US was, is, and will always be behind the door of any country where it has economic or geopolitical interests. Donald Trump has acted like a landlord, feeling entitled to take over the wealth of whatever nation he chooses. Whatever nation he chooses, or expand his real estate empire anywhere he finds adequate. Trump was a partner with Israel in killing of over 70,000 Palestinians. Trump is interested in making the seashore of Gaza into luxury hotels, resorts. Gaza is rich with offshore natural gas, valued at up to $400 crore per year. Trump has an eye on this also. Although the Trump administration claimed that it is waging a war against Latin American country Venezuela due to its alleged involvement in narcotic trafficking in the Caribbean Sea, no evidence has been provided to validate this claim. Thank you, comrades. See you next week.